Right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's live lesson. Today, we are going to be talking about adverbs. I don't know if you have noticed recently, the marking criteria, you're actually given some marks for putting in 2 or 3 adverbs, 2 or 3 adjectives, a couple of synonyms, as well as figures of speech. So we don't want you to lose out on marks. So you need to know what an adverb is, how to use it, how you can identify it. So let's look at today's document. Right, let's look at adverbs. First of all, what is an adverb? Okay, it's simply a word that describes a verb, adjective, or another adverb. Okay, so it's not too difficult to figure out. Okay, I use the word describes here, but you might notice the word modifies. It's used quite a lot. Oh, if you can read that, you'll be lucky. Write it a little bit better. So you can use the word modifies, or it just really means goes together with. So a word that goes together with a verb, adjective, or another adverb. That is exactly what an adverb is. Right, the next question is, how do you recognize an adverb? Okay, you might be in a progression test, say identify an adverb, or even an adverbial phrase, which mean the very same thing, but we'll look at it more closely later. Okay, and we've got to ask the adverb questions. What are the adverb questions? How something is done. You're describing a character or something that happened loudly, peacefully, quietly. You see the how words generally end in ly, like the majority of adverbs, other than some irregular adverbs, of course. The other question, where? It's going to be a place. Here, there, everywhere, anywhere. At home, in town, at school. That answers the question where. When? Time question. Yesterday, now, tomorrow. And of course, we always have the why question, which can generally be about because. Typically, you might use more than one adverb to answer this question, so the answer becomes an adverb phrase, which is simply a phrase that acts as both an adverb and adverbial phrase to describe a verb, adverb, or adjective. And the last adverb question is to what extent, which are adverbs of degree, extremely, quite, particularly, for example. Let's look at this one. The movie is not very amusing, so we don't like it. The movie is barely amusing, so there's very few jokes in it. The movie is not particularly amusing or a laugh. So that's the extent or degree of how much I liked that movie. Look at the next part. The movie is fairly amusing. The movie is quite amusing. Or the movie is slightly amusing. So if you're desperate, you should go and watch that movie. This is me describing to what extent we like that movie. And look at the third one. The movie is very amusing. The movie is extremely amusing. The movie is really amusing, or the movie is remarkably amusing. So I advise that you do watch it. I recommend that you watch that. So you see the adverbs of degree put a lot of different meanings into those sentences. And we're going to look a bit more at that later. So that's a good way to get some meaning into your sentences. Here's some basic examples. This one would answer the question, how? Okay. The adverb of manner. How did he walk or talk or whatever? Quickly, highly, slowly, frequently, squeakily. And then we've got adverbs of frequency, which are to do with time or how often. How often? Hardly, often, seldom, twice, always. And here's your adverbs of time, which answer the question when, now, just now, recently, soon, never. Where, adverbs of place. Near, far, up, down, around. You'll notice some of these words are prepositions, but they can be used as adverbs of place. Then we finally got to what extent are adverbs of degree, okay, which are words like rather, absolutely, greatly, totally, partially, okay. I rather like your new hat. I absolutely love your new little dog. Oh, I am greatly embarrassed by my mistake. I am totally exhausted from my week's work. I would partially recommend that movie. It's okay if you're desperate. Okay, so, oh, okay, not to worry, somebody's late, but again, as we said, IT glitch, network this time. So let's just look at the adverb again. Adverbs modify or describe or go with verbs, adjectives, or other adverbs. How do you recognize an adverb? If you either have to identify it or if you're going to write in your essay with one. You just ask the adverb questions. How, where, when, why, and to what extent. The adverbs of degree, okay? How, when, where, why, and to what extent. And there's some little examples there on page 1. Okay? Right, let's look at the next section. How to use adverbs in writing. How do you decide which adverbs to use? Oh, because as I said, the marking criteria for assignments now includes, have you used 2 or 3 adverbs? Have you used 2 or 3 adjectives, etc. So you're just throwing away marks if you don't put any in. So this is what you must do. While you're doing your essay plan, you should always do an essay plan before you write because it makes your life much easier. You've done all the thinking in your plan. When you're writing, you just have to write. So in the essay plan, you must write a list of adverbs or create a spider diagram of adverbs that you might use in the essay. You're not going to use them all, but even if you've just got a couple there that you can use, you just need to look at your list or spider diagram. Then they're at your fingertips for easy access when you're writing. What is a spider diagram? It's just basically trying to put your words like this, completely. Maybe that's a kind of main one you might use, but you could say entirely. You could say absolutely. You could use perfectly. You could use utterly and utterly exhausted. I'm totally out of it. He was wholly foolish to do what he did. You are positively right. I am thoroughly disgusted with you. So you have already got your spider diagram, okay? A little web of words that you can use when you need them. So you don't need to think too hard now. They're all sitting in front of you. You decide which ones you want to use, which ones are going to go best with the nouns and verbs you're using, nouns, verbs, and adjectives. Now, not only should you have a list of adverbs in your plan, you should have a list of nouns you're going to use, you should have a list of adjectives that you might use, and you should have a list of verbs that you can use. Okay? You're not going to use them all at this point, But if you've got a nice little list like that, you can just pick them out as you go along. And because you've done a lot of thinking to put these together at first, maybe you can use them in a future assignment. So you don't even need to plan extensively. You can just look at this main plan you started with. Okay, so be careful with that. How do you decide which adverbs to use? Just make a list and see which one's going to fit in with your writing. Right, why are adverbs so important? Adverbs are one of the 4 main parts of speech, which of course include nouns, verbs, and adjectives. That's your 4 main parts of speech: nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. Why? Each of them has a special purpose in a sentence. If you do not use adverbs, you might be unable to convey important information about the nouns, verbs, adjectives, or other adverbs in the sentence. And you'll have to write long screeds of explanation rather than just using a nice adverb. Right, adverbs provide great descriptions and they add extra information about how, where, when, and to what extent things happen to the verbs, adjectives, and other adverbs in your sentences. They can communicate your meaning efficiently. As I say, without writing screeds, you might be on a word limit. You can emphasize certain points by what you're saying. You can also convey emotional information and maybe even elicits empathy from your reader. Maybe you're writing a persuasive essay, letter, or whatever, and this is how you can get empathy from your reader, so you make him agree with you. You use adverbs, and they are really good for clarification of a context. What do I mean by that? Let's look at these 2 sentences. You missed the bus. Okay, that is straight information. Anyone could be saying it. The narrator, your mother, a bus driver, doesn't matter. Who cares? You missed the bus. Look at the second sentence. Obviously, you missed the bus. Am I being sarcastic by saying that? Or am I criticizing someone for missing the bus? Am I disapproving because he didn't get up early enough to get to the bus stop? So the second sentence conveys a lot more feeling or emotion about someone missing a bus. So that's why the buses are a bit difficult. And adverbs really make a difference. Now, I want you to read these 3 paragraphs very carefully. Let's look at number 1. Okay, this is the first one. The boy jumped on his bike. He rode the bike to the old motel. He walked to the front door and knocked. The door opened. Okay, so a couple of facts about a boy going to a motel. Big deal. Okay, anyone could write that. Doesn't convey anything much to me. But let's look at the second one. And the boy unhurriedly jumped on his bike. He slowly rode the bike to the old motel. He walked cheerfully to the front door and casually knocked. The door opened slowly but surely. Now, can you see with all the adverbs we've put in there that this adds a whole new dimension to paragraph 1? Okay, that's why we've used the adverbs to make it different. Now, let's look at the difference between paragraph 2 and paragraph 3. The boy jumped angrily on his bike. He rode recklessly to the old motel. He walked aggressively to the front door and knocked viciously. The door jerked open violently. Can you see the difference in the meaning and tone of these paragraphs depending on what type of adverbs we have used? And that's what's going to improve your writing. and can convey the correct tone or mood according to what you visualize in your mind. You can visualize this much better because you're using those adverbs. Number 2 is more casual and laid back. Number 3, why is this guy so cross? Why is he frantic? I want to read more of this essay to find out why. Okay? So adverbs will make your writing much more interesting. Okay? And that's why you want to use them, and this will give you your extra marks, and it very easily sets a tone and mood without you having to write huge swathes of description. This has told us shortly and sharply about the mood, tone, and maybe even the setting of your essay. Okay, so adverbs providing great description. Okay, communicate meanings efficiently, emphasize certain points, convey emotional information, and maybe even elicit empathy from your reader. So very important to get those adverbs written. When should that adverb be used? As we mentioned last week, we talked about dialogue tags. You use a dialogue tag to convey emotion and tone. But be careful not to overuse them or it becomes rather boring, same old, same old. Look at number 1. Get out, she shouted angrily. We are telling the reader about how she shouted. Okay? So from that, we have to think about why. And then another way you could do this, but with very few adverbs, you can show by what you write in your dialogue. Okay? Number 2, I don't want you here. You are disgusting. Get out, she said. So we've just used said, but we've now written why she doesn't want them. So that just answered the question, how? This is why and to what extent, the reason why. He was disgusting. Okay? So dialogue tags or putting it in the dialogue itself. Think about that. Now we can add context or new information, especially with time and place. The girl left the house early to get to the post office when it opened. That tells us when and why. She had to get there before it opened. She arrived fashionably late for her own birthday party and kept everyone waiting. Okay, shows a bit of the girl's character. She wanted to be the center of attention. She wanted everyone to look at her. So she arrived on her own, fashionably late. She would be one of the in crowd and everyone would be watching her. So she's a bit of an attention seeker, and that could be of interest depending on what the story is about. Okay, so that's context and new information by adding just an adverb. Maybe we want to emphasize the meaning and make a point. Look at this one. The girl has a totally unique singing voice. To what extent is the singing voice good? It's totally unique. Nobody else has one like it. So we've emphasized that point just by putting in our adverb of degree in this case. We can also use adverbs to replace awkward phrasing. For example, the man patted the dog in a rough manner. But maybe, again, you're short of words and it is a bit awkward. The man patted the dog roughly. So we could say that we're speaking more concisely. We don't need to beat around the bush there. Then finally, why would you use adverbs? Maybe to get the exact word or phrasing and meaning that you need. So rather than say the old man sat by himself, we could say the old man sat alone. Does that convey more tone or mood to you? Rather than say the woman spoke to the child in an irritable manner, it's a bit long-winded. The woman spoke irritably to her child. And then it was inevitable that the knight succeeded in his quest. We can say that more briefly with the knight inevitably succeeded in his quest. Okay, so adverbs can be used for those very purposes, right? Right, and also let's go on a little bit. Common problems placing adverbs in a sentence. Where do I put an adverb? I've got a list of them, but where should they go? Right, where does an adverb go in a sentence? This can actually be a tricky decision because some adverbs can go almost anywhere in a sentence, like the word sometimes, because it can go at the beginning, after the subject, or at the end. For example, sometimes I go to school early. I sometimes go to school early. I go to school early sometimes. So there are a few words that adverbs that can go in various places, like the word just, even, almost, and nearly. For example, if we say only the girl brought cheese, it actually is describing the girl. Everybody else brought sausages, let's say. The girl only brought cheese. It describes what she brought, so it's describing the verb, and that's describing the noun. This is describing the verb. So everyone else brought many other things, but she only brought cheese. And the girl brought only cheese is pretty similar, and it describes the cheese, which is the noun. So you see how the adverbs can get in there and go with nouns and verbs. Okay, sometimes is particularly one, just, even, almost, and nearly are the most common ones you'll probably be using. So make a note of that. Let's look at some adverbs that might only go at the beginning of a sentence. Frankly, I don't think he goes to school at all. Unfortunately, you could be right. Personally, I think he's too smart to go to school. So they're one that make a point and they emphasize things because they're at the beginning of the sentence. Some adverbs might go only in the middle, by which we really mean after the subject. I will probably go to school early. She is always late for school. She is rarely at school early. He is never late for school. So we call that being in the middle of the sentence, but really it's after the subject. Then you've got your ones that go at the end of the sentence. They make the point better at the end. She goes to school infrequently. He doesn't walk the dog often. She takes lunch to school every day, apparently. Okay, so these adverbs going at the end make a different point. And here's when not to use an adverb. Linking verbs like is, sound, feel, and taste should always be followed by an adjective, not an adverb, simply because the modifier will be describing the subject of the sentence, not the verb. So if you see these words that are used for linking things, you must use an adjective, not an adverb. Okay, right, just looking at our timing. Let's look at adverbs and adverb phrases. What's the difference? How can you identify them? An adverb phrase does the work of an adverb, and it can usually begin with either an adverb or a preposition. And it can appear alone and still be called an adverb phrase, or it can be modified by other words, either in front of or after the adverb. Okay, so adverbs, adverbial phrases, very, very similar. One's longer than the other. Let's look at some examples. And how are we going to identify it? Because we are looking at the adverb questions, which are how, where, when, why, to what extent. These are all examples using adverb questions. The teacher appeared just in time to stop the bullying, luckily for us. Okay, someone asking for the document. I'll make a note of that. Okay. Squirrels seldom find food in winter. Okay. He almost never has sugar in his coffee. To what extent does he have sugar in his coffee? He almost never. Time and extent. That one was time. Again, just in time, luckily for us. Why? That would answer why. Right, here's one. If you've got a cat, the cat puked right there. Right there. Where? That's the place. And that's the exact place right there. The degree or extent. Same with this one. He eats quite healthily. He eats healthily. He eats quite healthily. That's how healthy he is. So that's answering the question, how? She feels sick. Why? About traveling alone. Okay, so that's why. It begins with the preposition about. She feels sick about traveling alone. Answers the adverb question, why? So if you're asked for to write the adverbial phrase, there you've got it, about traveling alone. Again, how many? How? Very few students do homework. How do they do it? Enthusiastically. So this one is answering some how questions. And how many? This one, there were few non-fatal diseases in those days. Back in the olden days, back in time, everyone died. They had a toothache or got germs, bugs, because they had no antibiotics, no nothing. Okay, so that answers again the question, when? Here's another when question. He left town a few months ago. That's your adverb phrase, a few months ago. Here's another one. She played the piano in a beautiful manner. We could use beautifully if we wanted, but that shows us how she played the piano. And then we've got the last one is a time question. When? Once upon a time, there were 3 bears. So that answers the question, when? In your adverb questions. So hopefully, now that we've looked at what an adverb is and how to recognize it, you will be more able to use that adverb. Right, let's stop share for the moment because we're running out of time a little bit. Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining us. And hopefully, as I said, you know a lot more about adverbs than you did when we started. Any questions, queries, comments onto your web chats. Okay, guys, thanks very much for joining us and see you next time.